UK has been very, very uncooperative with that stupid island that they have.
He wants me to yield on my position, and I'm not going to do so.
Tension is mounting around the world. And some governments are in a race to display military dominance. From land to sea, even tiny islands have not been spared.
When you come to military partnership, you cannot find any better or bigger partnership than the UK-US deal on Diego Garcia.
Diego Garcia is a small, isolated island in the Chagos archipelago at the heart of the Indian Ocean. But the UK-US military base on the island was built on what analysts describe as a history of colonial misadventures and secrecy.
What was done on the basis of lies and racism.
This is our island, this is our right.
TRT Afrika retraces the controversial detachment of Chagos from Mauritius, how the island has remained in British hands for over 200 years now, and why a high-stakes sovereignty deal looking to extend UK's control over Diego Garcia for another 99 years is at the center of diplomatic drama. Chagos is a dreamy African archipelago with some 65 odd islands dotting the Indian Ocean.
I would say it's come very close to what paradise would probably look like.
But the island would attract the world's superpowers, not just because of its breathtaking beauty, but also its strategic location. Chagos is nearly 2,000 kilometers away from Mauritius, where it was colonially administered, a perfect site for a secret outpost.
This place has become one of the most important military bases for America. In fact, it is described as the most important base outside America itself. Remember that America has something like 1,000 of bases around the world, but none of them are that important as the one on Diego Garcia.
Diego Garcia is the biggest island on the Chagos archipelago, perched on nearly 7,000 acres of land.
You look at the shape of Diego Garcia, it looks a bit like a horseshoe, which is very, very useful militarily speaking, because all their military ship can go in and all they have to do is protect the mouth of the horseshoe.
What triggered interest in Diego Garcia in the first place?
In 1962, China attacked India. There was something else happening with Britain as well around the same time. Yemen was in the process of fighting for their independence. So at that time, Yemen have given warning, advance notification to Britain, look, you've got to depart, leave the base that you have set up in Aden.
That meant losing a critical military base in Yemen, which historians say the British used to control the whole of the Middle East. It was unsettling. Peter Thornycroft, the UK Defence Secretary at the time, travelled to Washington to meet his US counterpart, Robert McNamara. McNamara was equally unsettled with the developments in Asia. He would offer just what Thornycroft wanted to hear.
He said to him, look, you've seen what happened. Now remember, we are in the middle of the Cold War mindset, okay? Then he said, we American, we have nothing in the Indian Ocean, from the west of Indian Ocean all the way to the Pacific. We don't have a base. So I think we should start thinking how we can develop a base together.
And so Thornycroft went back to London to deliver the message to his colleagues in government.
They all say, oh my God, this is a gift from God. Because at that time, Britain was fairly poor. So they said, we need to grab that offer from America.
By then, the US had already surveyed the Indian Ocean, and Diego Garcia was top of their list. Being a colonial territory of the UK, the Americans went on to make a deal. The US would fund the project and the UK would provide the land.
You know the Americans, they use the word, we want the island to be sanitized. Sanitize in their military jargon means void, absence of any human presence.
But while military deals were being made in London and Washington, the most important detail was being ignored. The island was part of Mauritius, and the country had filed for independence a year earlier.
While Mauritius were following the roadmap with the colonial office towards its own independence, exactly around the same time, Britain and America, they are following a secret roadmap how to secure Diego Garcia. In my view, illegally, because it was not allowed for them to remove a group of people from their birthplace. It's not allowed for them to dismember a territory.
But they did, and renamed it the British Indian Ocean Territory. Still, the legal landmine remained. To bypass it, the British organized a meeting in London with some Mauritian leaders with a clear agenda.
The colonial secretary, his name was Anthony Greenwood, he called the 4 leaders separately. He said, we want you to agree to the detachment of Chagos.
The British offered a payout to the would-be new government and a resettlement plan for the islanders. That too didn't work. But inside the colonial ruler's playbook, there was still one more option. Prime Minister Harold Wilson delivered the message.
So Wilson said to the Premier of Mauritius, you see, if you make life difficult, you don't want to consent. I can do it without your permission. We can have something called order in council. It's a procedure, it's a legal tool that colonial power, they can do to introduce certain legislation without going through Parliament.
And so, on November 8, 1965, the British detached Chagos from Mauritius by order in council. The following year, on December 30, 1966, the UK-US agreement on the joint military base at the British Indian Ocean Territory came into force. The evacuation of the roughly 3,000 Chagosians then began, discreetly at first.
At that time, from 65, even before 65, all the way to 17, it's still a secret military project between Pentagon, Ministry of Defense in UK, and State Department. That's why all along, throughout that time, they keep saying to each other and to inform all their embassies around the world, please never, if you are asked questions by outsiders, by journalists, by other foreign countries, pretend you don't know anything, you've never heard of this. Never mention the base.
Secrecy was vital to avert trouble, first to the UN and secondly with the US Congress, which was yet to approve funding for the project.
I was uprooted in 1968
You were there.
with my whole family. I was only 4 years old. I was a very little boy.
What do you remember of the day you left?
Oh, it was very sad because my sister was hurt by a wheel cart. And when my mom goes to the dispensary, a nurse said to my mom that she had to travel to Mauritius to have better treatment. We all moved to Mauritius in a view to return because all our belongings we left on Paris Banner. Unfortunately, when we arrived in Mauritius, 3 months after, my sister passed away. And when my parents want to return, this is how we know that it will be impossible for us to return because the island will be given to America to build a U.S. military base.
Colonial crime against the Chagosians is actually one of the best and clearest documented.
Were there people who tried to, to go back, or they just gave up?
Oh, we tried to go, how to go? There is no means to go. This is a problem. From Mauritius to go to Chagos, it's 4 days on sea. How to go? No one will take the responsibility to bring us back. They don't want to have trouble with America.
When you grew up later and you understood that, they needed the military base, and the conditions the US had given to the UK was that there should be nobody on the island, what did that make you feel?
Oh, this is the reason why I'm been involved in the struggle. I take legal action against UK government and bring them to court. I start legal procedure in 1997, and I won my first landmark victory was on 3rd November 2000.
Still, it amounted to nothing. The Mauritian government would take the battle to the UN's International Court of Justice, arguing that its decolonization was not complete following Chagos's detachment. Bashir Ibrahim Khan was in court in February 2019 when the judges delivered their advisory opinion, another landmark win for Mauritius.
The president of I think there are 13 judges, okay? He said, what do you mean they consent? In 1965, they are not a sovereign country. So all these people whom you are saying the premier or the attorney general or some other ministers, what he called these fancy titles were given to them for the pleasure of Her Majesties. But it has no international legal recognition.
The court pointed out that Britain had violated the UN Charter, forbidding against the dismantling of a territory before its independence. ICJ ordered the colonizer to pack up and leave Chagos by August 2019.
But what did Britain do? They said, no. The decision is only an advisory opinion. It is not binding.
Meanwhile, the 1966 US-UK Pact had run the 50-year duration stipulated in the contract. It ended in 2016, but they extended it to 2036. But after years of legal battles, UN resolutions, and an ICJ opinion against UK control, the British negotiated a deal to transfer sovereignty to Mauritius while keeping a 99-year lease for the Diego Garcia base.
And Keir Starmer, he has said one of the reasons why he's signing the deal is to stop the risk of the base of Diego Garcia going to court by Mauritius.
The Mauritian government embraced the prospect of an average $136 million annual lease payment. This culminated in a UK-Mauritius sovereignty deal that was signed in May 2025. The US endorsed it, and the bill only needed ratification by the UK Parliament. But then, the tide changed. January 2026, and President Trump lambasted the deal, describing it as an act of total weakness and great stupidity by a NATO ally.
The words from President Trump were expressly intended to put pressure on me to yield on my principle. What he said about Chagos was literally in the same sentence as what he said about Greenland.
At home, opposition against the deal is also mounting, and Starmer has had to temporarily withdraw the bill from the House.
The Prime Minister is giving away territory we own and paying £35 billion for the privilege.
Some echo Trump's sentiments about foreign threats, suggesting the islands could fall to China or Russia. But it's quite the opposite, according to Starmer. A lease on Diego Garcia would ensure no other foreign power establishes a base on the archipelago. On the 17th of February, Trump appeared to have reconsidered his stance, only to launch another stinging criticism a day later. He said leases are no good when it comes to countries, and that Starmer was making a big mistake. His post ends with a warning: do not give away Diego Garcia.
Is this deal, the sovereignty deal, a step in the right direction for Mauritius, do you think?
You either have sovereignty or you don't. But you cannot have sovereignty over only a small part of the territory.
But instead of nothing, why not taking this and continue to claim, and just take into consideration that day by day our people is disappearing, because the youngest people born in Chagos is now 53 years old. How long should we go?
You know, my mom passed away in September this year, and one of her last wish was to go there to see her island one more time, but this will never happen. And you know, sometimes when I talk about that, I'm very emotional, but you know, I can feel like all the natives, they will never go to see their birthplace.
Whether or not the colonial ruler surrendered sovereignty over Chagos, the island's freedom still remains a distant dream.